Hello and what's going on? Rich Ryan here, bringing you a new map review for Big Bear 2022 Spartan race. This map review is of course brought to you by the Obstacle Racing Collab. Today, Nick Mask joins me and we do a deep dive on the 2022 Spartan Race Super course. This is going to be the course that we'll see for the Elite National Series and for the US National Series age group. So a lot of cool stuff, really good insight on this. But first, big shouts to our Patreon members. If you want to support the members of TORC here, help us get 2 races and help elevate the performance of the athletes within the sport, you can donate using the link, the Patreon link in the show notes. Big shout out to our newest Patreon member, John Ross Wiley. Really appreciate the support. Love all of you guys. Thank you so freaking much. All right, here we go. Nick Mask, Big Bear. All right, Nick Mask is with me. Nick, what's going on? How are you today?
Oh, pretty good. Had my morning coffee, so.
Same. So I'm caffeinated, feeling ready to rock on this map. So Looking at this map from previous years, at least last year, almost the same.
There's got to be like very minor changes, if any. Yeah.
So we're going to get into it. I mean, first thing off the bat for this, some things that you can anticipate with this terrain. It's going to be dry. I haven't seen the weather. It's usually like harder dirt. And since this is on a ski mountain, it's not necessarily going to be super technical as well, but it makes for very steep ascents and descents.
Definitely like steep ups, steep downs, hard packed dirt. It's going to be pretty groomed. I was surprised about how dry. Like when I look at footage from last year, it's super dry. Even in the fall, it looked super dry. I did look at the weather. Today it's like freezing. It's like 34 degrees an hour ago. But it looks pretty good for race day. I think the high is in the 70s. So the morning shouldn't be too bad. I don't know. I'll have something to say about this later, but I don't think weather is going to be as big of a factor as I thought it was going to be.
The one thing to consider if you are not from a mountainous region, like this is I think we start at 6,000 feet or so. I can't really see on the map there.
It's like 66 mids, near 7. Yeah.
So it's up there, right? And like in these type of regions, it's going to be colder than where it is if you are in the Midwest or in the East Coast right now, especially in the mornings. Like, so if you expect it to be kind of warm, even if it's like 45 in the morning, it's still going to feel like kind of cold, but once that sun comes out, it's going to warm up. But it's going to be pretty pleasant. It's pretty good weather.
Granted, like San Luis Obispo was 2 months ago. Even then, and it was farther north, it was really, really cold before the start line. And that race didn't start, until 2 hours after the normal start time. Like this is going to start, the elite wave at least is going to start at like 7:15 versus 9 o'clock. How it did for the first series race. So I would expect it to be very cold. Like people are going to be out on the course at like 6 o'clock.
Right. So I would, in terms of like gear to bring, I don't necessarily know if I would race in gloves or long sleeves or anything, but I would have those with me just for warm up purposes, just to feel okay before the start. But once you get going, because it's dry, like the humidity doesn't like stay on your hands at the same way that it would for like a New Jersey race or like a Charlotte race or whatever.
This is the West Coast. It'll be pretty dry. Hopefully.
It's gonna be pretty nice. So let's just look at the actual race itself. So from the start line, it's gonna start almost the exact same way. I believe this is the start. So you kind of come up and you cut across the mountain to start. So it is an uphill start, and then it goes across, and then you start that big first ascent, which is basically just straight up.
Yes, I was looking at it, and it looks like even though the grades, the percents change and undulate because it's a ski resort, not everything is like perfect. You are going to be averaging like 20 to 25% climbs for that first mile.
Averaging something like that is very, very steep. So expect like 30s and 40s at some places. Were you looking on Strava for this?
So I've looked at Strava, and then I looked up the topographic map of Big Bear Ski Resort, which actually looks way more tame than the Strava satellite makes it look. Strava makes it look like you're doing like 40+% ascents. But then I did the math and I took the peak height and I took the base of the mountain height and just made a line, like just a linear slope. And the average for the entire mountain is like 21. So it actually doesn't get as high, I think, as Strava thinks you're getting. But that's not to say it's not going to be brutal. It's still going to be very difficult.
Like if we look at the actual elevation map here, you're going to see there's like peaks and then sharp like valleys here. I would imagine these after you come out of a short descent and then back into an ascent. This looks like the steepest part, right? So you might like come off of a climb and then head back into something that's like 30 or 40. Where you're looking here, it looks sort of gradual, kind of going up, but I'd imagine that's still 15 to 20 at like least.
And it's a mile straight. Like it's not going to be the percent that gets you. It's going to be the percent for 15 minutes. That's going to be what hurts. And looking at race footage from last year, since the super looks, because I think for the most part, we're talking about the super. That's what the series is.
Yeah, that's good to put. Even the elite national series is the super, and so is the age group national series. So we're just going to talk about the super in this.
Yeah, and like we could chime in about the beast in the sprint, but like at the end of the day, they all start the same. They all end on the last 3 miles the same. So it's just the middles that kind of change for each one. But for the super, that first mile is definitely like the tough part in terms of climbing. And then from what I got from the footage last year, the guys seem to be working, well, guys and girls seem to be working really hard around where you were talking about in those peaks, right before they crest to the last climb. That looked like the steepest part.
Yeah, and that could be expected. So for this first mile, for most athletes, I would recommend keeping it pretty cool. There's not a lot in your way. And like I said, it's not very technical. If you're a good climber, you might feel inclined to hammer this thing because it is going to be pretty steep and it might be to your advantage, but it's still very early. None of the obstacles have happened. You have a big descent and another huge climb coming after this. So my general recommendation is going to be to keep it pretty cool on this, because you get to the top and then you hit a sandbag, which is this loop here, which does kind of scream down. From what I remember, I believe this was the same one. I ran this race in 2019, which was the Beast course, but I think the sandbag was in the same place. So it's pretty steep here. And then it's pretty steep on both ends. So this is like, and then we're also at 70 something. I can't really tell.
You're higher right there. Well, yeah, probably 70, 72 to 75 at that point on the mountain. Like you're
we're not all the way up, but
no,
you're up.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like the first comment I was going to make about this course is if you break it down and you look at it and you actually look at the mile markers, there are only 7 obstacles in the super in the first 2/3 of the race. So sink that in, that for 4 miles, you are going to get only 7 obstacles. That's not even 2 obstacles a mile. This is a run or a hike or a trail, however you want to look at it, for 66% of the entire thing. So as much as you don't want to kill yourself on the first mile, I think competitors need to understand that, 2/3 of this race is going to be a foot race. And there's like the obstacles in it they're real, I guess. Like I wrote down, like, I think, you got Twister and Beater. Those seem to be like the 2 failable ones.
It's Bender even. It's not even Beater.
Oh, yeah, sorry. You have Twister and Bender. Like, so let me take Bender out of that. You have Twister and maybe Olympus.
We'll give it Olympus, yeah.
And like, I think Spartan actually, or whoever designed this course, thought this might be wet day of the race or so cold that these grip obstacles would be very failable. Because if you look at the penalty loop list, every single obstacle that requires grip strength is a penalty loop. Like all of them. I highlighted, you guys are expecting dew or expect it to be cold, but that's a very forgiving list of failable obstacles to just give a penalty loop for.
Yeah, and maybe it is just that they're just like to get, because they are at the top, maybe just like to get a bunch of volunteers and judges up there. You probably only need one person to be like, penalty loop, go, penalty loop, go.
Yeah, and that's a good point, just for ergonomics of the course and getting people up.
But at the same time, like, since they are up there, it is going to be harder to breathe. Like, that is just like, it's going to feel harder up there. Your respiration rate will probably be a little bit more out of control than what it would be in a typical race here. And that's one of the main causes in missing obstacles.
for
But it's
sure.
going to be dry. I would
That's good
imagine
to
it's gonna
hear.
be
Yeah, if it's dry, which it should be, and the weather points to that, knock on wood, like it's been that way in the past. I foresee the actual worst obstacle being a 5K uphill.
dry.
Like I think people need to realize that's the biggest hurdle here is you're going to be running a brutal 4 miles, pretty much up. You have some downs there, obviously. You go almost all the way back down to the start, but it's at 7,000 feet, and for those who aren't acclimated like me or others, it's tough. Like that's already tough.
I would agree. I think that the terrain and like the altitude and the elevation gain and loss are going to be the hardest part of this. And that's the thing. After the sandbag, this is where you're going to get a really solid descent. So you're at mile 1. You're like in the second mile.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like, or where's the second mile marker?
Mile
There it is.
two is
It's
like
right
right
here.
at the bottom of that descent, almost.
Yeah. So this is going to be a part where you can really scream. If you are a good descender, like you might want to take advantage of this part. The descent later in the race seems to be broken up with obstacles throughout pretty much the entire duration, with the exception of maybe like 3/4 of a mile. So if descents are something that you look forward to and you need to make up ground, this is going to be a good spot for you. And like you said, because it's so run heavy in the beginning, if you are a better runner, and that's like where you kind of make up ground, you might want to go here. If you get out ahead, it's going to be hard for someone to be who's obstacle efficient to kind of catch you later on. Like I said, because the descents are so broken up in that last one.
Yeah.
So maybe it is a worthwhile time for someone to really kind of hammer this downhill and then just kind of get ahead going up the second big ascent.
It's definitely a who's who and like what your goals are. Like, what are you trying to do? If you can afford it, I wouldn't hammer the first 2 miles of this race.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're trying to win the thing, or if you need to stay with certain people, that descent is a really good catapult into getting into good position. Like being at the top, in the top like 5 or the top 10 of whatever you're trying to do it's going to be really hard to lose that position if you get there on the climb, because yes, people can make up more ground on descending, but that mile 6 is a minefield of obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's going to be gassed. So unless you're one of the 1% who can just descend that whole downhill at like sub 5 mile pace, which not very many people are going to, yeah, the race is going to be mostly won in the first 4 miles of climbing.
I agree. And then as we come out of so as you descend back down, you don't get all the way back down to the festival area. It looks like you cut back across the mountain.
Yep.
So not much crowd support here, but I will say that you can, if you are spectating or you have a spectator coming, you can walk up these paths pretty well.
Oh yeah, you have time.
You can do it.
Yes.
So coming back around, as we come up around this bend here, this looks like an ascent and then one of those sharp descents, like right in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And then Twister is at the peak of what looks like a very steep climb.
I think they positioned difficult obstacles well in this race, minus the spear, which, biggest hater ever here. But for the most part, these obstacles are positioned where you are gassed going into them.
And yes. And so, I mean, we're looking at it, and on this map, it looks like it is at the very peak of this little climb, but chances are that it is uphill.
You think the obstacle itself will be uphill?
I do.
Woof.
I do.
That's good though. I mean, Twister's not. It's a penalty loop if they don't lie, and two, it's not such a difficult obstacle. Like multi-rig on a slant is a problem, right? Because you have to stay in your lane. Whereas Twister, you're forced. It's a metal bar, right? Like it's just the uphill forces driving you. Like it doesn't change the torsional motion of the Twister. It's just harder.
It's a good point.
Whereas if it's on a string, or if it's something where you need a straight line, it's much more difficult. So that's a good place for it. That goes back to what you're saying with don't kill yourself on that initial climb, because if you're gassed at the Twister, good luck.
Also, something to keep in mind after this sharp descent, before you head back up to the top, you're not going to be at the top of the second climb until 7 foot wall, right? So just like know that like you're still on your way up after the sharp decline here. And just this is going to be a pretty taxing session and just a section here. So just know like that you want to have your breath under control by the time
Yeah, you
get
don't want to be
Twister.
redlining on Twister.
No.
I was looking at that and I was like, okay, 7-foot wall, that's where the climb ends. And it's like, no one's going to remember that. You're going to be like, is this wall 7 feet? I think a better
Right.
way of looking at it is right before the 7-foot wall. You have, where is it at? It's like,
Beater.
Beater. So beater would be a good mental note of I'm almost done climbing.
Yes.
Because you're not going to mistake beater for anything else. So when you get to the beater on the super, know that the climbing's almost finished and that you can maybe push your aerobic systems at least, and then move to the physicality of your quads being smashed for the next, the rest of the race. But it looks like there's only a tiny climb left after.
Yeah, it's just going to be annoying. You're not quite done. Just know you're not. It's not these 40% grades anymore.
No.
This top section, which is very little of the beast, of the super, it's most of the beast, is pretty runnable. Outside of the fact that you're at 70 plus thousand.
You're just really high.
You just can't breathe.
I was gonna say with the beast though, if you look where the beast deviates at the beginning and it's like starting mile 2 or maybe mile 3 for the beast, do you see how it basically gets to the top right off the bat? And then they have a 1.25 mile descent.
It's a crazy descent.
That descent, if you're doing the beast and you're watching this, do not crush that descent because you have 10 miles left, 11 miles left. I guess you have 10 at the end of it. You won't have the legs to go all the way back up and all the way back down. Like that's too brutal of a descent for a 1.25 miles.
Like
it's
this
so early in the race.
This is where Johnny Luna Lima, like he had his breakout race here because of this descent. That it was just, yeah. And he's like the best.
Not everybody's Johnny Luna Lima.
Very few. But that is a great point. Olympus looks like it is either going to be flat or downhill.
That'd be sweet.
Which would be nice.
Downhill Olympus, I mean, just don't touch your feet. Like hang high.
Yes.
But because if your legs swing out in front of you, right? But like, no, I guess if it's downhill, that's even better.
If it's going to be dry too, they can get your feet up there. Chains become a viable option when it's dry. Olympus, if you're not great at it, this is a place where you could probably do it.
Oh, for sure. This is a good spot for it. I'm still like use the holes only for my Olympus, but chains are probably the next best option. I don't see anybody using the handholds.
People do. I mean, when it's wet, for sure. The holds are better than the chains when it's wet. The chains are just like impossible.
The holes are better than both.
Holes are the move. Yes. Holes are the move.
You haven't figured that out yet.
So then you kind of do a quick dip, and then you have the final ascent. Yeah, which again doesn't look as steep as what you've had before, but it's probably gonna be similar to like the first mile of the race. And it looks like it's about 3/4 of a mile to the top.
Yeah, and I anticipate that even though it's maybe not as steep and maybe not as long, this will be the most soul-crushing portion of the race. I think everybody's going to be tired and fatigued to a point here. This 3/4 stretch up is going to be lonely.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
At the top, then you have box, and then beater and 7-foot wall.
All doable.
Yeah. All doable. Box might be on that incline as well. So you might, again, it's just similar to what you have to do with Twister, just knowing that it's coming, keeping a respiration rate in check. Have your strategy. If you need to like clamp your feet against the knots at the bottom, you're probably going to have to use that rope. It's probably going to be hard to jump all the way up and grab the pipe behind the rope.
That's a shoulder dislocation waiting to happen too.
Yeah, Mark Cadet hurt himself on that one year. But if you can do it, if you're tall enough, like VJ can do it.
Like if you're tall, you can. I mean, I've gone for the jump, but like going straight for the bar, I think it's easier to do the jump and then grab the rope at the top because there's a little bit of wiggle room for the hand.
That's true.
But yeah, so those are doable. The beater is probably the scariest one in terms of failability. Just because it's a moving monkey bar, you never know, but
it's dry, man. Like that one is just fun when it's dry. You're just good to go. And
it was flat last year. So yeah, it was on a flat, but then you start descending. So this is not, it's going to be interesting how this plays out because it is
pretty riddled with obstacles. Like if you look at even just the elevation map, all these like white points, it doesn't give you a good stretch to really go.
There's only one, and it's
toward the
later.
end. Yeah.
It's later, yeah.
So you got stairway at the top, which will probably be beautiful.
It's a ladder. Yeah, you get a great view.
Z-wall shouldn't necessarily be a problem on a day like today, unless it's pitched a certain direction. Yeah, just pick your line, know where you're going. And because it has, so let's just go through them. Stairway, Z-wall, vertical cargo, inverted wall, plate drag.
Yeah.
And then barbed wire crawl, multi-rig, and Atlas. And
so barbed wire crawl is different this year. It's not the last obstacle.
Yeah.
The barbed wire has now been put, in the middle of this like super fast downhill running section. So most likely the barbed wire is downhill, rolling friendly. That's how Seattle was a few years back, or maybe every year. I can't remember, but it's kind of nice as long as there's not a ton of rocks, because you just have so much momentum that.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like Seattle, it's like it'll be like grassy and wet. Not here. It might just be jagged, nasty rocks. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll probably be a lot like how slow it was in terms of like ashy dirt.
Yeah.
Picked up. But you shouldn't be probably in hordes of people at this point. You're probably alone. Most people are. Depending on what heat you're in, obviously. If you're in a more packed up age group, you could be with a lot of people here, but it's late in the race.
Yeah.
Again, pick your line.
Pick your line. When it's downhill, it's a little easier to roll.
Yeah.
So if you can do that, just making sure that you're one thing you like to do in the roll, like stopping, getting up and rolling the other direction, just so you're not so dizzy or you start kind of like veering off. Yeah. And then, so with this section here, so it looks like a mile and a half, a little under a mile and a half of descent with obstacles punched in your way.
Yes.
After an obstacle in this, will you try to hammer each open section to get to the next obstacle, or will you try to save it for that one open spot and just kind of survive these obstacles?
For this, like, quote unquote gauntlet of barbed wire multi-rig Atlas carry, I'm not doing anything brash. Okay. I will save something to a degree. Like, I'm going to let gravity carry me, but until I get to whatever obstacle it is, looks like you see that big section and then you have a huge descent.
Yeah.
It's right after multi-rig. Is that the Atlas?
That's carry? Atlas.
Mm-hmm. So after Atlas, I will probably try to light up that section because it's the last time you can pull away as a runner. But then on the back of your mind, you need to know that the last obstacle, kind of jumping ahead here, is bucket carry.
Yes.
And being able to turn on the jets on a bucket matters because, people's buckets sometimes vary by a minute on short ones. And this could be a longer carry. From what I remember watching footage last year, this carry is not super short. It's probably like 200 meters, maybe more.
And it's going to send you up and down.
And if you can run that up, or at least strongly hike that up and send the down versus somebody kind of like power walking and waddling it, you're going to make up more than you could on those little sprints between obstacles.
And that's where VJ did make his move last year on that bucket. The bucket was a couple of obstacles before. I mean, I think it finished with, I don't know, whatever, slip wall and barbed wire or something.
It's similar. It's just that, it finished with barbed wire, whereas this one finishes with the bucket and then you're done. The dunk wall comes before the bucket this time.
Yeah.
Let's back up, because you're going to do a lot of stuff going into that mud dunk slip wall kind of thing. And this is the most important part of the race, because they saved some of the bigger obstacles right for the last, what I initially said was 0.2. I think this race is 6.5 miles.
Okay.
I don't think it's a 10K. I think it's longer.
Yeah.
So in the last 800 meters, the last half mile, you got rope climb, you got helix, rope climb, monkey bars, A-frame, which is just slow, at least it's not at the finish.
Right.
And then you have the Herc hoist, and then devastatingly a spear. That is brutal.
Yeah. I'm after Herc hoist and after a bunch of stuff, but like it's slow, right? Like the A-frame, you'll bring your heart rate down. Hercules, you can only go so fast.
Yep.
If it was like at where Helix is, where I think it's been in the past, where you kind of bomb down the hill and right into it, I think that's worse because like
it is.
If it's at the last half mile anyway, like if you miss it, that's going to be a lot of your race, no matter where it is in this last half mile.
Yeah.
So, and it could be on flat. It could be worse spots.
The spear's devastating though, just because of where it is placed. Anyone around you, if you miss, has beaten you.
Oh yeah.
And there's nothing you can do. Like you could be the fastest burpier on the planet. You have lost to them.
Yes.
So the only worst place the spear could be positioned here for a miss is the first obstacle or
right.
at the bottom of that descent. Like, yes, you don't have to carry those burpees with you for the entirety of the race. It's the last 400, but mentally that's going to crush your bucket. You're not going to want to, you're not going to want to hammer that after dealing out 30 burpees. So spear is super crucial. It's going to change a lot of places.
As always, right? And like the one thing with the spear at the end of a race, like I don't love it, right? It's like this whole, I mean, it's just like there's no good spot for it. But like the only thing racing, if you don't have a good ascent on the second way up or something like that, is to stay mentally engaged because people could miss a spear.
Yeah. Keep
like,
that in your back pocket that people in front of you will probably miss it.
Yeah.
And wherever you're at, it probably looks worse than it actually is. And you have to keep that positivity that, oh, I'm going to hit my spear. And not everybody in front of me is going to, and not everybody behind me is going to. So keep that positivity with you, at least through the whole race, that it's at the end and it can change anything. But brutal that it is there.
Totally.
But I want to think like kind of to close this. When you're done running, obviously when you hit that helix and you're kind of in the end game here, where are you making your last push on those last 6-7 obstacles? Like what's the one that you work besides bucket? Because bucket is 100 meters to the finish and you're gonna redline it. Right. Which one of those do you put all your money into?
Yeah, I would like bucket's the obvious one. That's like I love where it is here because it does kind of allow for a finishing kick, which is something we don't typically get. I mean, if you're gonna make up ground on any of them, it's gonna be Hercoist, right? Like you're an example of it last race. Like the Hercoist was where you were able to catch somebody and pass them.
Yeah.
And with spear just coming up, I don't think you can necessarily worry about how your arms and how fresh you're gonna be this late. Like if you can make a move on Hercoist, you got to do it.
Yeah, I think it's got to be hoist. And I mean, helix, rope, and monkey bars are fast, whether you're super good at them or not. It's like a matter of 10 seconds in the range. Maybe the A-frame, like not as much as it wasn't slow, where like at least for me, like that was the fastest I could possibly get through an A-frame. Maybe not quite as panicked, but it might be worth saving 3 to 5 seconds on an A-frame, really charging it because you don't have a lot left. But I think, you're right. The hoist and the bucket are your big ones.
Yeah. Bucket's everything. I kind of like this for a finish just because it does give a little bit more grit and ability to really kind of push.
Bucket's I think bucket and sandbag are the best 2 obstacles to finish a race with because they just everyone can do them and they hurt.
You can actually make a move based on your effort.
Yeah, it's not like a 3-stage multi-rig where it's like, oh, hope you have the skill to get through it kind of a thing, which is important, just not at the end when you want to spend everything.
Yeah, and like it mattered more when people would miss these things. But like at this level, at this point on this course too, like people aren't going to miss it.
No,
especially when it's a super. There's not even like the ropes or anything like that. Like you can't really make like even if can you make up a second and a half if you are the most skilled? Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. I like the way this course is laid out. I think it should be fun. I mean, it's definitely going to be for the climbers and descenders. So if that's your strength, know where to go, know what you're going to do. If it's not, have a plan so that so that you're not running into a brick wall. Manage that effort. Figure out where the spots are going to be where you need to go. Any final thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think, final thoughts here are really just spend your energy the most efficiently that you can. Like that, for everybody, that's going to be what separates winning from losing. Is, did you put your energy in the right sections of this course? Because some of them are going to pay out way better than others. So you kind of need to really know your fitness here, and not make it a pride thing of, oh, I have to hammer this hill to stay with person X or person Y. Like, no, this is a you race, right? Like, know yourself.
Great point, because you can't overcome something like this. Like, maybe you could on a flat. It's like, let me just put a little surge in and see if the person relents.
Yeah.
If someone else can climb better than you, like banging your head against it isn't gonna.
Let them have that. Don't let them destroy you because you don't have the same abilities or talents as someone else has. Like, do your own race. Don't let them pull you through theirs.
And sometimes that's a trap with something like this, where the climbing, it feels slow, right? Like, it's not like a fast run, like right away, like, oh, this pace is too fast for something that I can hold. I know that I'll back off.
Yeah.
When it's going up and it's slow, like, you might be halfway up the climb and be blown up and not even realize that was going to happen.
Muscle fatigue's real.
Really real. And then the altitude part is as well. It's
Yep.
Run your race, know your strengths. So
yeah.
Cool, Nick. Well, we're looking forward to seeing you out there, seeing some of the TORC members out there. So we'll be following along. So appreciate you popping on and spending time giving us this map review.
Yeah, for sure.